she's too close to death to make the right decision. That's what my daughter-in-law said right outside my bedroom door, assuming I was too old and too far gone to understand. But I heard every word, from the mocking laughter to the light, heavy footsteps of contempt. I spent my life raising my daughter, staying up all night with fever, working silently behind the scenes so he could grow, develop, and live well. And now, in my old age, they labeled me legally incompetent, gave me double doses of sleeping pills every night, and quietly drained the bank accounts of me. They thought I didn't know. They thought I would slowly fade away in silence. But they were wrong. A week from now, the whole city would see me on television, celebrated as a symbol of timeless beauty, wearing the old-fashioned dress they once laughed at. And that was just the beginning. "She's too close to death to make good decisions," Melissa said casually, and I heard every word. The hallway always smelled faintly of lemon oil and something artificial, perhaps the lilac diffuser she insisted on tucking into every outlet. It lingered like politeness at a dinner party no one really wanted to attend. If you have ever been abandoned by your own family, if you have ever felt like you were erased from your own life, comment to 1 so that others like us know that they are not alone. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more stories that touch the deepest corners of the heart, where silence is no longer weakness but quiet strength that finally finds its voice. I had been sitting by the bay window in my sunroom, a novel open in my lap, the same paragraph reread for the 3rd time. The book was beautifully written, but I wasn't really reading. Not anymore. Not after the footsteps came. They were light designer heels by the rhythm of it and purposeful. I heard the soft rustle of a shopping bag and the distinct tone of Melissa's voice. Calm, casual, the kind of tone people use when they're not worried about being overheard. "She's too close to death to make good decisions," she said. "No bitterness, just matter of fact." That stung worse. There was a pause. I imagined her waiting for a response. Perhaps on the phone, perhaps not. Then a short laugh. That kind of breezy, throwaway chuckle people use to signal, "I'm not saying anything awful, just the truth." I didn't move, didn't flinch. The book stayed where it was, my hand gently closing it with a quiet sigh. The door to my room had been left slightly ajar enough to hear, not enough to be seen. From the kitchen came the gentle thud of the fridge, the clink of glass, and then the breezy call. "Margaret, I'm heading to the mall. Need anything?" I turned my head toward the open door and replied evenly, "How long will you be gone?" "Few hours. I've got returns and tea with Marissa. You'll be okay?" I smiled, though no one could see it. "Of course." I waited until I heard the mechanical chirp of the alarm arming, the garage door grinding open, the engine fading. I counted a full minute after that, just in case. Then I stood. My room was neat. Deliberately so, pale blue quilt tucked tight, silver frame photos dusted weekly, though no one ever looked closely. On the nightstand, 2 pill bottles AM and PM sat beside a water carafe and a delicate clock that no longer ticked. I'd removed the battery years ago. I preferred silence. But it wasn't the nightstand that mattered now. The drawer beside it creaked slightly as I opened it. Inside, tucked beneath a leather-bound notebook and a folded shawl, lay a slim stack of papers, yellowed slightly at the edges. The will. The original one. Jacob's name, my son, was on every page. Executor, beneficiary, power of attorney, all drawn up nearly a decade ago when George passed. It had felt reasonable back then, responsible. He was my only child, my only family. But time has a way of revealing things you didn't know to question. I laid the document flat on my writing desk. My hand ran along the edge, smoothing the page like I was ironing out history. I noticed my signature at the bottom, decisive, clear. I remembered the day I signed it, sitting in Caroline's office, still numb with grief, trusting that love would be enough. Next to the will, I placed my medication organizer. I stared at it for a long moment, then pushed it aside. I opened the hidden panel at the back of the drawer and pulled out an old flip phone, the kind no one used anymore, the kind no one monitored. I scrolled through contacts. Most were empty, but one still remained. Caroline R. I pressed call. It rang once, then twice, then, "Hello." Her voice hadn't changed in years. "Caroline," I said softly. It's Margaret. Are you still practicing estate law? There was a pause. Then the tone of her voice shifted, sharpened. I am. Why? I looked down at the name on the will, the ink that had once felt like safety. I'd like to revisit a few things. Later that afternoon, Melissa breezed back through the front door carrying 3 boutique bags and a lavender-scented candle. She dropped them on the entry bench and chirped, I brought you a new hand cream. You'll love it. I sat at the kitchen table, a cup of decaf Earl Grey in front of me, cooling untouched. That's thoughtful, I said, not looking up. She smiled too widely. You okay? I nodded. Just resting. She leaned down, touched my shoulder briefly, perfunctory contact, and headed upstairs. I waited until I heard the soft thump of the guest bedroom door close behind her. I stood, made my way back to the study. The desk was an antique walnut piece George and I had bought in 1985, when we still dreamed of writing novels and planting apple trees. It had deep drawers with brass pulls that stuck slightly if you opened them too fast. I pulled the bottom one slowly. Inside, tax records, insurance summaries, old letters. I pulled them out carefully and began sorting. Caroline would arrive tomorrow, and I needed everything in order. Old deeds, account numbers, policy beneficiaries. Each one had to be verified. I opened my laptop. It whirred to life slowly, just like me. I entered the password. The printer blinked and beeped in the corner. I started printing, one document at a time. The soft shuffle of paper became the rhythm of my resistance. I wasn't dying. I was deciding. Caroline, it's time, I whispered into the phone. I'm ready to change everything. How long will you be gone? I asked. Melissa didn't know it was the last time I'd ask, without already knowing the answer. She stood by the front door, adjusting her oversized sunglasses with a little dramatic flair. Her coral lipstick hadn't budged, and neither had her self-assurance. The white linen pants, the pressed blouse, the matching tote from a boutique she only ever referred to by first name, everything about her screamed curated ease. Few errands, she said cheerfully. Return at Nordstrom, a stop at the boutique, and tea with Marissa. 3, maybe 4 hours? I nodded mildly. Enjoy yourself. She leaned forward, squeezed my shoulder with one hand. A brief, performative gesture, the kind that left no warmth behind. Don't do too much while I'm gone, she added with a wink. You're supposed to be resting. I gave her the thinnest smile. That's what I'll do. The door clicked shut. A moment later came the familiar double beep of the alarm system, followed by the soft grind of the garage door opening. I waited, counted every second. 7 minutes later, when the engine had long faded, I stood. The study was already prepared. The walnut desk sat dignified against the wall, flanked by built-in shelves lined with our old books, first editions, signed paperbacks, and the occasional forgotten gift from George. Everything had been dusted, aligned. The top drawer contained what I needed today, a folder labeled Estates in my handwriting, my old signature, rounder, bolder than it was now. I pulled it out and opened my laptop again. The screen flickered softly. Password entered. The printer came to life in the corner of the room with a warm chime. I moved through each task as I had always done, carefully, precisely, without rush. First came the deed to the house, signed 20 years ago after George retired, our names both on it back then. But 5 years ago, Jacob had suggested, just in case, Mom, we add his. I'd agreed. It had felt responsible. Not anymore. Next came the joint savings account, originally opened to help Andrew manage home repairs, an account I now realized had been slowly emptied and rerouted into newer ventures. I thought the down payment for Melissa's boutique was their effort. It had been mine. One by one, I opened and printed every document tied to that quiet erosion. I took out a fresh field notebook. I had used it for years, account numbers, dates of appointments, whom I spoke to, everything recorded in tight cursive, like breadcrumbs across my past. At the bottom of one page was a phone number with no name beside it, my backup contact at the bank. I dialed it from the flip phone. Greenridge Client Services, this is Dana speaking. Dana, it's Margaret Whitmore. I'd like to schedule a freeze on account number ending in 0049. She paused, Then her tone changed. Respectful, serious. Yes, of course, Mrs. Whitmore. I see that you're listed as the primary on file. Would you like to proceed now? Yes, and I'd like written confirmation mailed. I heard typing, then the rustle of paper. That will go out today. You'll also receive digital confirmation. Use my new number, I said. This line. I gave her the one connected to the flip phone. Quiet, unsynced. Next, I logged into the insurance portal. It was clunky, not elegant like the bank. Passwords were longer, more annoying. I opened the silver box from my recipe drawer, where I kept the old handwritten codes. Melissa never went near it. She preferred meal kits and apps. That kept it safe. Inside, a blue index card had the codes, IN's ACC number, pin 01, and beneath them, a smiley face I'd drawn years ago to remind myself which one had the special characters. The insurance dashboard showed it all: policies, payouts, beneficiaries. One by one, I removed Jacob's name. Each change prompted a confirmation message, which I watched land, one by one, in the inbox tied to my flip phone. I printed each notice, stapled it in the corner, filed it in a new manila folder labeled Revocation, Active. Then came the pension. The system was slower but more secure. Security questions popped up in sequence. Name of my first pet? Muffin. City of birth? Baltimore. Color of graduation dress? Teal. That last one made me smile. Teal. The same one I planned to wear again. Let them laugh. I reached the pension page, scrolled to the bottom. A recurring payment, $275 monthly, to J plus T Holdings LLC. I clicked. The name redirected to a boutique website, Melissa's. I didn't flinch. I'd been expecting it. Instead, I took a picture of the screen, downloaded the receipt, saved it to my folder. Then I clicked Manage Payment. 3 options: Edit, Pause, Cancel. I selected Cancel. There was no warning pop-up, no dramatic animation, just a green banner. Recurring payment successfully canceled. I exhaled. Then I printed the page, circled the transaction ID, and added it to the file. $3.75 for official confirmation by mail? Absolutely worth it. The printer purred again, each page warm to the touch, each one a quiet declaration. Back at the kitchen table, I poured myself a cup of tea. The porcelain mug had blue hydrangeas around the rim, part of a wedding gift set from George's mother. Melissa had wanted to donate them last year. I'd said no. The tea had steeped perfectly, strong, steady, just like me. I sipped it as I reviewed the folder. Everything aligned, everything signed. Caroline would arrive tomorrow. I'd have her file the legal revocation for power of attorney, reassign my healthcare proxy, and finalize the updated estate trust. I reached for a blank envelope and slid the pension cancellation confirmation inside. No note, no explanation, just truth. I sealed it with both hands, pressed the flap flat. Then I walked toward the front of the house. The mail pile sat on the entry table. Today's stack hadn't been sorted yet. I slipped my envelope into the center, just beneath a folded catalog and an unread flyer. From the kitchen came the faint clink of Melissa's return, her shoes on tile, her perfume in the air. I turned just before she entered. "Need help unpacking?" I called casually. "Nope, just a few things," she said. "Got something for you too. Lavender hand cream. You'll love it." "I'm sure I will," I replied, already walking away. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I didn't delete it. I downloaded the receipt and labeled it Revocation Evidence 001. "You froze the account," Melissa said, stunned. I folded the towel again, crisp, clean. I did. It was brunch Sunday, the kind Rachel declared as just family, just style. She'd sent a digital invitation the week before with soft pink script over an ivory background. Autumn Elegance, it read. Subtle pressure, carefully worded. She called me 2 days after it went out. "Hey, Mom, I was thinking something light for the dress code, casual, modern, neutral tones, okay?" I didn't ask why. I knew. I've been a mother too long not to understand when an outfit becomes a silent battlefield. I said, "Sure, dear," and smiled into the phone. That Saturday, I opened the cedar wardrobe at the end of the hallway. Not the sleek closet Melissa had built with brushed brass rods and color-coded bins. No, this one still smelled like lilac sachets and thyme. There, wrapped in a garment bag and tissue paper, was my mother's teal silk dress. It wasn't glamorous, but it had shape and purpose, a high neckline, cap sleeves, a ribboned waist. I remembered the way it moved when she walked, like memory made visible. I pressed it gently and hung it up to breathe overnight. The next morning, I dressed alone. No one knocked to offer help. No one asked if I needed anything. That had become the norm. The garden was already set by the time I came outside. Long tables with ivory runners, gold-accented cutlery, mismatched floral plates that Melissa claimed were vintage-inspired. Everything looked curated, like a magazine spread, but it felt cold. Guests had started to arrive. Rachel was greeting people at the gate, holding her mimosa like a microphone. Daniel trailed behind, offering small nods, holding the family dog like a prop. Melissa was at the drink station when she saw me. For a second, she smiled, until her eyes scanned my dress. The smile faltered, then came the raised brow, the double blink. "You look nostalgic," she said, placing a strawberry slice into her flute. I didn't flinch. "It belonged to my mother." "Oh," she replied, dragging out the syllable like it had a bitter aftertaste. "Very heritage." She didn't need to say more. Her tone did the work. The first two guests to approach glanced at my dress, then at each other. One whispered something to the other behind a smile. I stood by the hydrangeas, nodded politely, and let the moment pass through me like wind through lace curtains. Melissa walked past a little later and said just loud enough, "I wouldn't be caught dead in that, but I guess it's her era." I didn't respond. That's the thing about being underestimated. Silence is mistaken for surrender, when really it's strategy. I sat near the far end of the table, next to Mrs. Green from down the road, a kind woman who wore orthopedic sandals with rhinestones and never missed a church bake sale. "You look lovely today, Margaret," she whispered as she passed me a napkin, like a portrait from another time. That was the kindest thing anyone said to me that morning. Halfway through brunch, someone from the local news wandered in. A friend of Rachel's, apparently. "Doing a piece on generational style," he explained, pointing to the camera hanging from his shoulder. "Rachel said the family brunch might offer some great candid shots." Of course she did. He wandered among the tables, capturing footage, guests sipping from crystal glasses, children playing with maple leaves, close-ups of carefully arranged fruit platters. And then he turned toward the garden bench where I was sitting alone, the sunlight catching the edges of my dress just right. He paused, raised his camera. "May I?" I nodded, said nothing. The shutter clicked twice, then again. "Beautiful fabric," he said. "Looks like it has a story." "It does," I replied, smoothing the hem, "but not one anyone here wants to hear." He smiled, a little uncertain, then wandered off. Melissa called out from across the yard, "Don't get too serious, Jason. We want brunch vibes, not memoir." People laughed. The day blurred after that. Polite conversations, passive glances, coffee poured too quickly, cake served too late. By dusk, the last guest had left, and the garden was scattered with half-empty glasses and footprints on the lawn. Rachel hugged me goodbye with a chirp. "Thanks for coming, Mom. Next time, maybe something lighter in fabric? We were baking out there." "Of course," I said, touching her cheek gently. "Next time." Inside, I placed the teal dress back in its bag. It smelled of lavender and pride. I brewed myself a cup of mint tea, then sat down to check my phone. One new message from Harper. "Hi, Aunt Margaret. Saw a clip of a garden brunch on the local station just now. Was that you? You looked incredible." Attached was a grainy video. I tapped play. There I was, alone on the bench, backlit by gold sunlight, the hem of my dress catching a breeze. The anchor's voiceover spoke softly. "In a world chasing trends, sometimes elegance speaks from another time, quiet, composed, enduring." I stared at the screen. They hadn't meant to capture me, but they had. Not as a relic, not as a warning, as a reminder. I closed the clip, then my eyes, let the warmth of the tea press against my chest like comfort. I didn't know what Rachel or Melissa would say when they saw it, but that no longer concerned me. My story had already begun to speak, not with noise, but with presence. I turned off the TV, folded my planner open to the next page, and underlined Thursday. Let's finish this. She'll sleep through anything these days, Melissa laughed into the phone, but I was wide awake. The door to the guest bedroom was cracked open just slightly, enough for air to circulate, enough for sound to drift. I hadn't planned to listen, but then again, Melissa hadn't planned to be careful. I just double them sometimes, she said, her voice breezy. Honestly, she doesn't notice. She sleeps better. It's kinder this way. A pause, a laugh, then a lower tone. She slowed down so much, it's not like she remembers what she takes anyway. I stood in the hallway, spine straight, my hand gripping the edge of the stair rail. My sweater sleeves trembled against my wrist, not from age, but from restraint. I didn't make a sound, no gasp, no confrontation. I just memorized the words. Later that night, Melissa dropped off the pill tray like she always did, with a cheery clatter and a perfumed, "Don't forget tonight's," as if she were placing a birthday gift instead of controlled substances on my counter. Same arrangement, yellow with food, white after. I nodded and smiled like always, but I didn't take them. Instead, I called Caroline. "I want full tests," I said softly. "Blood work, memory, cognition, prescription screening. I need proof." She didn't question me. 2 days later, I sat under the two bright lights of Dr. Mehta's clinic, the citrus scent of hand sanitizer mingling with the clinical coolness of laminated furniture and white noise machines. The nurse was kind. She offered me a blanket. I declined. "We're just doing a full check," she said. "Nothing to worry about." "I'm not worried," I replied. "I'm documenting." We ran through it all. Memory recall, perfect. Emotional reasoning, stable. Reflexes, slightly slowed but consistent. Vitamin levels, normal. Prescription interaction, one anomaly, elevated presence of sedatives inconsistent with dosage instructions. I folded the paper quietly. Dr. Mehta looked at me over her glasses. "Is someone administering your medication?" "Yes," I said, "but not for much longer." I smiled politely. She said nothing. That afternoon, I moved through the house like I always did, quietly, deliberately, but with purpose sharpened by validation. I placed my phone on the shelf beneath the stairwell, the one just outside the study where Melissa always made her calls. I angled it slightly, opened the recording app, and waited. At 8:47 p.m., just as I expected, her voice floated through the hall. "She doesn't ask questions anymore," Melissa said, light as air. "I honestly think she's more peaceful. She'll sleep through anything these days." Another laugh. Another voice replied, faint, maybe her sister. I didn't care. Melissa continued, "If she ever figures it out, she won't remember where she left the bottle." I refilled the tray myself. I pressed stop. The sound was crisp. The voices were clear. I attached the file and sent it to Caroline. Subject, documentation. No message. That was enough. Upstairs, the sound of Melissa humming floated from the bathroom. A careless melody, the kind sung by someone who believes they've won. I returned to the kitchen, placed the untouched pill back into its designated slot, and slid the tray behind the kettle. Out of sight, but not forgotten. Then I opened my planner. Thursday, doctor follow-up. Independent witness requested. I circled it in black ink twice. In the margin I wrote, "Final review, cognitive certification." 2 days later, Dr. Riley greeted me with herbal tea and a clipboard. He was kind-eyed, mid-40s, with a clinical way of showing concern without condescension. "So, Margaret," he said, clicking his pen, "what brings you in today?" "A rumor," I said simply, folding my hands. "I'd like to make sure it never becomes a record." He blinked once, then nodded. The assessment took nearly an hour. Memory retention, pattern recognition, problem-solving, emotional regulation. I didn't rush. I didn't fumble. I didn't ask for questions to be repeated. At the end, he leaned back and said, "You're more prepared than most 40-year-olds I've evaluated." "I've had practice," I replied, "being underestimated." He smiled genuinely. I left with a folder stamped in blue ink. "This patient is of sound mind and decision-making capacity." By 4:15 p.m., I was back in the sunroom. I placed both certificates, doctor. Metta's and Dr. Riley's, side by side, on the glass coffee table. Their seals shimmered faintly in the late autumn light. I ran my hand over the paper. Steady. I took pictures of each and sent them to Caroline. Subject, mental competence, verified. Within minutes, her reply came, received, filing with trust. You're covered. I rose and walked toward the drawer in the study, the one where Melissa had tried snooping before. Inside it sat the decoy will, the one dated 8 years ago, still intact, still bait. I didn't touch it. Instead, I opened the side cabinet, pulled out a slim blue folder, and labeled it in careful cursive, in case they try. Inside, I placed the 2 medical reports, closed the cover, filed it between the folders labeled Estate Trust, Active and Revoked POA. Everything had a place now. Everything had a purpose. I turned off the light in the study and paused by the window. Outside, the breeze moved through the old oak. A few dry leaves broke loose and fluttered down. Somewhere upstairs, Melissa was laughing into her phone again. This time, I wasn't listening for her. I was listening to myself. I didn't cry. I just filed it under consent not granted. Have a good week, I texted Jacob. I've been busy. No punctuation, no warmth, just a quiet sentence sent between 2 people who used to mean something to each other. I didn't wait for a reply. The morning was brisk when I stepped into the town car that Caroline had arranged. The leather seats were warm, the driver polite but distant. I appreciated that. We passed by the bakery where George and I used to get raisin scones on Sundays. The scent of cinnamon still lingered as we rolled by, as if the building refused to forget what it once was. It was a short ride to the Wilshire building. Glass walls, high ceilings, and silence that cost by the hour. Mr. Olson's office was on the 3rd floor. The receptionist greeted me by name, handed me a folder with a gold clip, and led me to the corner suite. Inside, he stood to shake my hand. Margaret, it's been a while, he said with a kind smile. I see we've got some updates today. Yes, I said, settling into the leather chair. I'm making a few things permanent. He didn't ask more. He'd received Caroline's email earlier that morning. The work had already begun. He turned his monitor toward me. Line after line of numbers, accounts, balances, schedules. I looked at them the way I always had, like puzzle pieces with sharp corners that only made sense when they were in the right hands. He walked me through each one. The joint checking account, now listed solely under my name. The brokerage account, restructured. 70% directed to the Northwood Foundation for Women's Education, 30% to Harper, my niece, in trust with a timed release. The emergency reserve account separated into a protected clause that required dual approval, mine and Caroline's. We reached the long-term care policy. You're still the policyholder, Olson said, but now you're also the sole beneficiary. Jacob was previously listed as secondary. Remove him. He clicked twice. Done. The room was quiet, save for the soft hum of the computer and the whisper of my heartbeat slowing with each decision. This wasn't revenge. This was protection. He reached the final item. Would you like to change the mailing address for all statements? I already have, I said. Caroline's office. They'll forward anything urgent. Then we're set. He tapped a final key. You're now fully secured, he said. No funds move without a notarized directive from your legal team. Not even a dime. I sat back, while my breath was steady. They'll be surprised, I said softly. Olson raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. He handed me a folder containing the confirmation packet, and I tucked it neatly into my structured leather purse. It wasn't flashy like Melissa's collection of designer bags, just one of those quiet, expensive pieces that last forever. By the time I stepped back onto the street, the sun had climbed higher, casting a clean light across the pavement. I crossed to the florist on the corner. No occasion, no birthday, but I thought perhaps today was worth some color. I picked out a small bouquet of white lilies and purple freesia, handed the florist a crisp bill, and declined the receipt. When I returned home, the house was quiet. Melissa and Jacob weren't due back for another hour. I set the flowers in a cut glass vase and placed them in the center of the kitchen table, not where people would expect them, but where they might actually be seen. I walked into the sitting room and opened the drawer beneath the sideboard. Inside were 3 folders, one labeled Harper-Trust, one labeled Foundation, and one unmarked, save for the name Rachel Whitmore, not for inclusion, but for clarity. I took out Harper's folder and slipped a sealed envelope inside. It contained a letter, longhand, on linen paper, explaining everything. Not just the logistics, but the why. "You have always been honest with me," I had written. "This isn't a reward. It's trust." That afternoon, Harper came by. She had a key, of course, from the days when she helped me recover from my surgery. She never gave it back. I never asked her to. We sat in the garden with mugs of rooibos tea and a blanket across our knees. The wind tugged at the edges of the tablecloth. The sunlight flickered through the rose arch like a soft applause. I handed her the folder. She opened it slowly. "Trustee," she read aloud, almost whispering. "And executor?" I nodded. "There's no sadness in this," I said. "I'm not fading. I'm focusing." She didn't speak for a moment. Then, "Are you sure?" "You don't owe me anything but honesty," I said. "You've already given that freely." She reached for the second folder, insurance policies. She flipped through the updated beneficiary forms, nodding at each change. "None of them go to them anymore?" she asked quietly. "No," I said. "The foundation gets the rest. You get a managed share. It's not to spend, unless you need it." She gave a small smile. "You thought of everything." "They assumed I wouldn't," I replied, sipping my tea. "That was their mistake." I handed her the third folder, thinner, cream-colored, sealed with a brass clip. "This one's for emergencies," I said. "What kind?" "The kind where lawyers stop listening to lawyers, where people pretend I wasn't clear." She stared at me for a long moment. "You're not afraid they'll come after you?" "They already did," I said simply. "They just didn't expect I'd walk back." We didn't speak for a while after that. The wind rustled the lavender bushes. A butterfly floated near the glass table, then vanished beyond the hedge. Harper placed the envelope back into the folder and looked up. "Do you want me to say anything to them?" "No," I said. "But if it comes to that, you may read the letter inside aloud." "To who?" "To anyone who thinks I wasn't watching." I stood then, collected the teacups, and walked inside. The sun was starting to lower, casting long amber shadows across the walls of the house. They hadn't noticed, but everything had already changed. I just smiled and said, "They gambled on my timeline. I invested in one without them." "You froze the account," Melissa said again, but this time she sounded smaller. She stood in the doorway of the living room, one manicured hand clutching her phone like a lifeline, the other hanging uselessly by her side. Her coral lipstick, usually precise, looked slightly smudged, as if her confidence had been applied in a rush this morning and hadn't quite settled. I was folding towels, linen, pressed, crisp, the kind you bring out for guests but never use because they're too nice. I folded each one into thirds, then in half, stacking them neatly in the basket beside me. "I did," I said, without looking up. Her silence stretched like a rubber band pulled too far. "You said, Jacob said—" I looked up. "I didn't say anything," I interrupted gently. That was part of the problem. Her mouth opened, closed. She blinked too many times in succession. From the hallway, the faint beep of the alarm system sounded. Jacob entering. I heard his shoes pause on the entry rug, then shuffle as if he wasn't sure whether to come in or flee. I rose and walked to the foyer. On the entry table sat a single white envelope. No logo, no flourish, just my handwriting, deliberate, clean, in ink that would not smudge. I handed it to Melissa. She took it slowly, as if afraid it might burn. "What is this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "A mirror," I said. "Read it when you're alone. Or don't." I turned, walked back into the sitting room, and resumed folding. Behind me, she didn't move. Jacob stepped in, his voice awkwardly cheerful. "Hey, Mom, we were thinking, maybe a dinner? Just us? Something small? We could talk." I smoothed a towel over the back of the chair. "That's thoughtful," I said. "But I have other plans." He hesitated. "You've seemed distant lately." I turned and met his eyes. "I've been busy." The silence that followed wasn't hostile, just honest. Later that day, Harper came by again. We sat on the garden bench beneath the rose trellis, the breeze tugging gently at the edge of her scarf. She didn't ask questions. She just passed me a small envelope. Inside were the final legal confirmations. Signed, sealed, and filed. The trust was irrevocable, the authority absolute. "You're covered," she said softly. "All of it." I nodded, exhaling as though I hadn't realized I'd been holding my breath for weeks. That evening, Melissa tried again. She knocked on my door with a box of pastries from the boutique bakery she always bragged about, set it on the counter with a hopeful smile. "I thought you might like something sweet," she said. I thanked her, placed the box in the fridge, and never opened it. She lingered in the doorway. "There's a program on TV tonight," she said. "They're airing that brunch segment again. The one where you were in the background?" I nodded. "They're doing a whole piece now," she continued. "Style that transcends age. They called you iconic." Her voice was thin, stretched over too much expectation. "We were thinking maybe we could all watch it together." "I already saw it," I said gently. "Weeks ago." "Oh." She waited. I said nothing. She left. I poured myself a cup of tea. Loose-leaf Darjeeling in the antique porcelain mug with the silver rim. I didn't steep it too long. I never do. As I sipped, I stared at the flickering candle Melissa had left burning in the kitchen. It smelled like lavender and something else I couldn't name. Effort, perhaps. Or guilt. The house was quiet. They didn't slam doors anymore. They walked softly now, unsure of what they were walking on. I liked the quiet. That night, I slipped the final folder into the fireproof box in my study, the one labeled Estate Final. Inside were the trust papers, the will, the medical certifications, and Caroline's personal letter confirming full legal standing. I closed the lid, locked it, placed the key in the teacup on my writing desk, beside the button collection George had once teased me about. The next morning, I woke early. I made tea, toasted a slice of rye, watered the lavender by hand. I sat by the front window and watched the sun inch across the floor, painting long golden bars over the wood, like slow applause. My phone buzzed. A text from Jacob. "Just checking in. Should we talk?" I didn't respond. Instead, I stood, retrieved one last envelope, sealed, unmarked, and then slipped it into my handbag. I walked into the foyer, slipped on my coat, and opened the door. Melissa looked up from the front steps, startled. "Oh, I thought you were still upstairs." "I was," I said. "Where are you going?" "Out." "Do you need anything?" I smiled. "Number, I have everything I need." She opened her mouth, closed it. As I walked down the path toward the street, the air was fresh, brisk with early November chill. Across the street, Marcia, my neighbor, stood by her fence trimming back her chrysanthemums. She waved. "You're glowing today, Margaret." I stopped, nodded. "Peace," I said. "Looks a lot like power." "That it does," she laughed. "Good for you." I turned and kept walking. They gambled on my ending, but I had already rewritten the script. Some victories don't come with applause. They arrive with silence, with a folded towel, a sealed envelope, a locked drawer. Margaret never raised her voice. She never shouted or slammed doors. She simply refused to disappear. She reminded us that dignity isn't loud. It's consistent. It's measured. It's dressed in a teal dress someone once laughed at. And now the world calls timeless. So here's the lesson. Don't mistake stillness for surrender. The quietest people often hold the deepest strength. Like a rose blooming past season, or a woman sipping tea in her own garden, peace can look like power. And power can look like you. If this story touched something in your heart, share it with someone who needs to feel seen again. And maybe, the next time someone underestimates you, smile softly, because you know better, and soon so will they.